Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Monday, October 4th. This is your Daily Buckeye Fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Maryland game is in 5 days. The game against Michigan in 54 days. It was another exciting weekend of college football. I'm joined by Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop, to break it all down. But I think overall, Tony, first of all, there are a couple takeaways. Number one, 8 of the top 20 teams in the AP poll lost, which is always a fun week.
Yep.
Especially if your team is not one of the ones that loses. That makes it even more fun. But it felt like that was a very good week, not only for Ohio State, but also for the Big Ten, and particularly the Big Ten East on the whole.
Yeah, there have been weeks this season where this is a big week for the Big Ten. I think a few weeks ago, there was a bad week where it was setting up to be an important week and things didn't go great. This week, however, things went really well, continue to go well. You have teams asserting their dominance on other good teams, which we saw with Michigan, which we saw with Penn State, and also perhaps Iowa, even though that's Big Ten West. But you're seeing some teams just really smash others where you're thinking, well, this is going to be a fun matchup, and turns out not so much fun.
Yeah. There were a couple games that I thought, like, you looked at the point spread, it was like, I could see the game going either way. It was like, no, that game could only go one way, exactly one way. You look at the Big Ten East right now, and this is going to be the title of the show, but is the Big Ten East the best division in college football? Because you could make an argument. The AP poll, as of the time of recording, the AP poll has not been updated yet, but you could make an argument. Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State all belong in the top 10, maybe the top 12, something like that. That's the kind of division that, A, you end up with a lot of ranked wins, which helps your playoff case later. But B, that's exactly the argument that gets made for the SEC West. It's like, look, so many great teams all in one division. It seems like that's the Big Ten East this year.
It will be interesting to see how quickly the playoff committee, moves the Big Ten East out after losses, because they seem to try to keep the SEC West teams in for as long as they can. Mm-hmm. And it's like you're 6-3, but you're hanging on at 23 or 24. Whereas I wonder if a 6-3 Big Ten East team is still going to be hanging on. But the quality wins are going to be there. They're going to beat each other up. I don't know that any of these teams outside of maybe Ohio State is going to go undefeated against the rest of the Big Ten East. Mm-hmm. And these wins, to me, it's a little confusing because they are dominating, but they're still like something they can't do. Like Michigan didn't run the ball. Mm-hmm. Penn State has had issues running the ball, but there's no 550 yards of total offense like Ohio State is doing. They're doing it different ways via defense or just bad turnovers from the opponent where you're kind of giving stuff away. But Michigan, Penn State, they're taking advantage of it. That's a sign of a good team as well.
Yeah, and Michigan State, you didn't mention that there, but it's just Michigan State. You look at the roster, it's like this is not a roster that's going to win a college football playoff game. It's just a team that certainly seems like it's very well coached right now, and they're getting good results. And even some results earlier in the year that you looked at and kind of went yeah, that's not all of a sudden a win over Nebraska might be, an overtime win over Nebraska looks a little more impressive than a week ago, because Nebraska just beat Northwestern all about the face and head for 3 hours on Saturday. You go through the SEC West now. Alabama is Alabama. Okay, check mark. They are good. Arkansas, who was number 8 in the country, just lost 37-0 to Georgia. So, okay, they beat Texas. That's a good win. Very clearly, they are not a top 10. If you're losing by 37, you're not a top 10 team. Auburn, 4-1. They got bailed out by that bad call against Georgia State and had a narrow game against LSU on Saturday night. Texas A&M has lost 2 straight games. Mississippi State lost to Memphis, almost lost to Louisiana Tech. Yeah. Ole Miss, they got killed by Alabama in the same way that Arkansas. They made it look a little closer, but it was 35-7 or 42-7 at one point on Saturday. Yes, there's Alabama stipulated, and yes, there is Georgia in the SEC East stipulated. Florida just lost to Kentucky. It's like the SEC East, the SEC in the entirety is just one good team in one division, one good team in the other division, and everyone else is they're okay, but they're not fantastic.
When you're talking about Michigan State's roster, I'm thinking similar things of Arkansas, where they put it together. They don't have the most talent, and they are susceptible to losing a game like Arkansas did. So Michigan State, if they are the Arkansas was apparently the second best team in the SEC West, perhaps.
Yeah.
Michigan State maybe the third or fourth best team. They'll have to beat Michigan to be to be better than fourth, I think. But right now, I'd say maybe they're the fourth best team. Certainly the fourth best teams in the rankings. So yeah, I mean, the Big Ten East seems deeper to me. Yes, Alabama is a giant. We're starting to maybe also see Ohio State emerge as that, but they're going to have to go through some solid teams who now have experience winning, now have experience dominating other opponents, have good defenses. Penn State may have a great defense. I don't know. Michigan's defense continues to surprise me, although playing against Wisconsin's offense is not exactly the stiffest challenge anymore. It's been a couple years where things have not gone great for Wisconsin, so these teams continue to take advantage of what we thought were going to be difficult schedules. Before the season, Wisconsin was chalked up as a Wisconsin win.
Yeah, and Wisconsin has not been what we thought they would be. On the other hand, Iowa has very much been, what we thought maybe Wisconsin could be.
Yeah.
Iowa looks like a world beater. They just killed Maryland on Friday night, and you go through the schedule, Ohio State's remaining schedule. As you're sort of trying to build a playoff case in your head for, okay, if Alabama and Georgia, if you just put Alabama and Georgia in, and you say Cincinnati is in, so how do you build the case for Ohio State to be that final team in the field? And you go through their remaining schedule, and you could be, for them to get in, they've got to beat Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, and then presumably Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. That could be four teams ranked in the top 10, four teams ranked in the top 12 this week. And, they're not all necessarily going to be there then, but those are all probably ranked wins, which goes back to your point earlier. You see the College Football Playoff Committee put teams in the top 25 when, you can almost tell what the College Football Playoff Committee does by who they rank 23rd, 24th, 25th. If they're trying to build a case for a team, that's where they are. If those teams are in there, then that makes a very, very compelling case for Ohio State to be, that fourth team, whether they're the third seed or the fourth seed, whatever it is, for them to be in that field if they can win out. And there's a lot of ifs there, but if they win out, that is a schedule and a resume that's going to make them worthy of inclusion.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was just looking at how that schedule is going to shake out for Ohio State. Could they play some undefeated teams along the way? Penn State will be in Iowa before Ohio State gets to play Penn State, so one of those two undefeated teams will be done. But if you're beating a bunch of one-loss teams, and I know we disagree about this, but will that be enough to overtake Oregon if Oregon remains a one-loss team? And I think it also depends on what teams look like at the end, who the committee wants to put in. But the way the Big Ten East is shaking out, and then also the Big Ten West champion, it's going to make things interesting. There's going to be some debate. We've seen where the committee has put a team above a team that beat them. Back to the first one with TCU and Baylor. I don't even remember which one it was, but the team that lost was ahead of the other team. It was a 5 and a 6. So you don't ever try to predict, I guess, what the committee is going to do. Just know that you're probably going to be angered by it at some point.
Well, and the Oregon thing is an interesting point, because we talked about this on our post-game instant reaction show for Buckeye Weekly. Oregon has the head-to-head win over Ohio State. They just lost on Saturday. They lost a game they probably shouldn't have lost to Stanford. So now Oregon has one loss. As soon as Oregon has a second loss, Oregon's no longer a concern for Ohio State. And there's a whole bunch of games left in their schedule. The other thing that, if you're going to make the case for Ohio State getting in over Oregon, even with that head-to-head, who is your signature win in the Pac-12 at this point? Their resume is going to be Ohio State, massive gap, whatever else they do in the Pac-12. Because I think everyone in the Pac-12 has a loss now. UCLA just lost again. Washington has a terrible loss, a couple terrible losses on their schedule. There's just USC is bad. Like there's not an opportunity for signature wins there. And if the committee does want to go with resume, then that makes it a very hard case for Oregon. Other than line 1 on your resume looks great. Everything else on your resume is like, not so much.
Yeah, in 3 weeks they travel to UCLA. who may or may not be ranked by the time they play Oregon, and that's their best chance. And so I think Ohio State's chances are getting better because they're playing better. Oregon continues to just toe the line and be you wouldn't want to be an Oregon fan right now, I think. While it's great that you're ranked, and well, not anymore that they're ranked so high, but you're still in the picture. But then, Tom, you also have to worry about Big 12, and Oregon or Oklahoma just continue to win by 4, and now it's like, well, they're undefeated. What are we supposed to do? I mean, we have to put them in. And our hands are tied.
Yeah, I mean, the ACC feels like it's out right now, basically. I mean, barring, unless Wake Forest runs the table, and I mean, if this is the year that the committee puts in a Power 5 team and Wake Forest, like, man, or in a Group of 5 team in Cincinnati and Wake Forest, like, man, I would honestly be like, I would just like to see that. Like, let's just prove to me that you would do something just insane. I don't think Wake Forest is running the table, since it's kind of an academic conversation anyway, but ACC is probably mostly out. Especially, Clemson has 2 losses and looks not very impressive against Boston College. Pac-12 is Oregon or bust at this point. Big 12, Oklahoma has not earned any of the benefit of the doubt at all with the way they've played this year. You figure there has to be a little bit also of, like, I know this is not part of the criteria, but like, they keep getting in and exactly the same thing keeps happening every time they get in. Like, at some point it's like, all right, what if someone else got a chance? Because they do the exact same thing every time they get in. You get the sense you're not going to scrape by all year. That doesn't, I mean, outside of 2002 Ohio State and 2014 Florida State, that doesn't usually work. So they had a close game against Tulane. They had a close game against Kansas State this last week, and I think there was another one at some point in there. They're going to have to play Texas at some point. They're going to play Texas. Okay, yeah, Texas is next week. They still have TCU on the schedule. I think they still have Iowa State on the schedule.
Yeah.
Like, at
Oklahoma State undefeated.
Oklahoma State, yeah. And at some point this is going to catch up to them, you feel like. And as soon as they have one loss, you don't have the resume based on how you've played so far. And so yeah, I think you need Oklahoma to get one loss, Oregon to get one more loss just to feel comfortable, like Wake Forest to get a loss. But these all seem like things that are going to happen. It kind of feels like if Ohio State just handles its business, they're going to be in a very good spot to make the playoff.
Yeah, Oklahoma State still undefeated. Mm-hmm. They will play Texas the week after Oklahoma plays Texas. Mm-hmm. So Texas could clear out some of the also rans. But Oklahoma State is very much like Wake Forest. It's like, yes, they're undefeated, but
yeah,
you don't have to really worry about them. The Big Ten champ with one loss feels like it's just here you've got a spot reserved for you. You're like a titanium member of the college football playoff, and you just show up and you show your card, and then it's like, yes, sir, right away, sir. As we talked about, the resume will be there for Ohio State unless everybody just completely collapses. But if Ohio State is part of making that collapse happen, maybe they get some credit for that as well.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need everyone to go. You don't need to beat all 11-1 teams. But if you're beating a bunch of 9-3 teams, 9-3 teams are in the poll, and at this point, Nebraska might be in the poll. You might sneak another Big Ten West team in there. So yeah, it's early. There's still a lot of business that Ohio State will need to handle, but the Ohio State's playoff chances look substantially different than they did just a couple days ago. Not only because of what Ohio State did, but because of what else happened around the country. So that is going to do it for this morning. Thank you guys for joining us. We will have another full week of coverage heading up to the Maryland game at BuckeyeScoop.com. It should be an interesting game. I know Maryland just got destroyed by Iowa, but that feels like if they don't turn the ball over, if they can avoid turning the ball over, that could be a much more interesting game this weekend than it was against Maryland or than the Ohio State game was at Rutgers. But can they avoid turning the ball over? That's kind of the $64,000 question. The Ohio State defense has gotten a little more opportunistic in the last couple weeks, so that'll be something to keep an eye on. But keep checking out BuckeyeScoop.com. We have a fantastic team of insiders providing coverage of the team, insight analysis, recruiting coverage, and much more. It's all at BuckeyeScoop.com. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the little bell. That'll subscribe you to our channel. That way you get notified every time we post a new video, new podcast, new pregame show, new postgame show, new live interviews with players and coaches from Ohio State. You can subscribe right there and get notified, and then you never miss a thing. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.